Okay, this is the policy committee, September the 14th. In attendance is one member of the public, Mr. Kurtz, Mr. Speed, myself, from the administration, Mr. Hurley, and Mr. Lauren, and Scott Matz. So Mrs. Bites hasn't told me that she would not join, so hopefully we will. Speak of the devil, Mrs. Bites has joined the meeting. Okay, we'll start off on getting a demonstration of the PSBA hosted site. You ready, Mr. Matz?
Oh, I am ready. So what we're looking at here is what our public will see when they come to the PSBA site. Like I said, it's developed by them. It's hosted on their board docs platform. I think you'll find that it's going to make our policies much more interactive for the public to see. So right now, I am logged in under policies under consideration. That's just for demo purposes. Ultimately, when this goes live, they will receive active published policies by the board. But over here on the left, we can see right now we're looking at the 000s and the 800 policies. If I were to click on that section, you're going to see it's going to list all of our individual policies, very similar to what we had done before in a list format. So let's take a look at one. We'll look at 001. So again, this is all occurring within our browser as opposed to a PDF. The old website displayed it in a much more static format. So looking along here at the top, we see what section it is a part of. We see the name of the policy number. And down below here, the legal section. And this is the really neat part. All of our policies obviously have the necessary legal references to school code or other applicable laws. So if we were looking down here along the bottom, next to our name section, there's a footnote here for one, which corresponds to section 24 of the school code. If I were to click on that, it's actually going to pull up the actual act here, Article 11, school districts, so where the school code is requiring this information to be in our policy. So any section as we're going down through here, it's going to include the necessary footnotes to the particular part of the school code, or like I said, any of our laws, any of the necessary acts, Act 2026, Act 71 right now, we're doing the suicide prevention piece. It will link right to that for our public to reference. Nice little feature up here at the top right. There's a button to simply email the policy. So if you want to email it to your friends and relatives for some exciting reading, you certainly can do that. Or you can print it out as you so desire with all the necessary footnotes and references included. So that is really actually the bulk of the site. All the policies will be transferred over to here as a review occurs and they're published and board approved. They all will come through from PSBA with these footnotes intact. They will, as they move through, you'll actually see they will reference other policies within it. So if one of our policies references another gaming group policy, it will have that exact same link back so you can kind of browse through. So our old setup previously would have required a lot more manual work to find this information. Via PSBA now, they are providing that for you, so you don't actually have to go out to the school code and find these sections. They're providing that information directly to you. And this is obviously all web-based, so it can be accessed anywhere there's an internet connection.
Okay, one question I have for you. I was on the website, and I noticed that the policies are now reformatted. So when you click on, just say, the 900 series, they're not individual any longer. You click on the 900 series, and you have the page down. It's like one big PDF.
Until we got over to this system, we did post them in bulk, knowing that this system was coming over. We didn't want to upload all the individual files, knowing that this system was going to have the more relevant information. Okay. So as we publish them on here, this is where we're.
So as we go ahead and have them approved, which will take a couple voting cycles to get through them. Say we do the 000, 001, 002. Those get enacted. We approve them. Now that long PDF list, you're going to cull those 3 out?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, and we'll start linking over here to the more relevant information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to do.
All right.
I have a question, Scott. I thought from the original presentation, there was a section where it would be our work in progress.
So that's on the back end. I believe that's the area Rob and Sandy will have. to
Okay, so
enter
we're
in
not looking at
information.
that tonight.
Right,
Just-
yeah, this is the public, this
Okay.
is the public view. Yep.
Yeah, Scott, I was just wondering, when we make the changes, that can all be done in-house, right? We wouldn't need to go back to PSBA to make edits.
Nope, it's almost like editing a web page, you edit content on the page.
What about for first readings, second readings, third readings? How would that work? Would there be like a preview mode or?
So actually at the top of this one, you'll see it. There is a status field right here.
Yeah.
So right now, it says from PSBA. So that means the policy came back from PSBA. They've inserted their relevant information. So there is a status field for first reading, second reading,
Okay.
solicitor review, and then ultimately, public or published or whatever status we so choose for that final
Yeah.
version.
So it says policies under consideration at the top. That's the banner.
Yes.
And what is there?
So the public.
There's a little drop-down box next to policies up top.
Yeah, the public would not actually see this. We just published these for demonstration
Okay,
tonight.
all right.
They would log in and only see our active published policies.
Okay.
They would not see any of that.
Okay, that's good because I don't want to have any. Even though we've done our maybe they're at our second review.
Right.
We're not going to at that point. It's unlikely we're going to make any changes. I don't want to have our
Right.
old policy, the new policy, be visible.
No,
So,
no.
Okay.
Again, because we haven't made this public, that we had to show you the
No.
under consideration ones.
Understood.
I have one more question. I understand from board docs, my seminar I took this week, that we always maintain possession of the ownership of the file. So if and when a future board decides to not go with this service, will we receive each of these individual policies as PDFs? And so we'll be able to take them right back over to our site?
Yes.
Okay. And we never relinquish ownership of them, even though it's on there, it's being hosted on their server for the service. Thank you.
Good question. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. We'll see if we can move some along and you see how the process works.
In bulk.
But as I understand it, this is probably a question for you, Rob, that Mrs. Kiki is now responsible for
Yes.
the, she's primarily responsible for the
Yes.
policy?
Yep.
Okay. All right, very good. Moving right along, we're going to get a report out from Mr. Small on the booster self-reporting.
Okay, policy 915 revised calls out in paragraph 4 under guidelines that each entity in the booster support organization are required to submit various documents, amongst which is a budget, bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. You see that on page 2 of the policy. And these documents were to be submitted to the business office by August 31st of each year. What I prepared, distributed this evening, is a summary page on top of what was submitted by the various organizations. So going down the left-hand side of that spreadsheet is a listing of the organizations, and then I summarized from those documents both the income and the expense to give you an idea of what they submitted. The only one that isn't on the summary page, is the music boosters, and they are attached in the very back, the last 3 pages, because they did such an extensive, detailed job that I simply included their report, both revenue and expense. The other one is the Sports Boosters organization itself. I included on the summary page on the front, I included the revenue breakdown that they submitted. And then, because of the fact that their expense presentation wasn't the same as the format that was submitted by the individual sports, I included that at the tail end of the sports section there. so you can see what they identify as the expenditures. About 4 pages from the end of the total presentation. So this gives you a good summary of what was submitted in their budgets. I also received the other documents as far as bylaws and officers, et cetera, et cetera. Any questions on the formatting, how I did it?
Well, I think one question I'm going to have to confer with Mr. Basil, make sure that what we're seeing here is what we're looking for. I know when fundraising occurs, there's a form that has to be filled out that says what the purpose is of the fundraising, and that should give us some of the, if there's detail lacking as far as what the fundraising dollars are going to be spent for, we can get that information.
That's where I was heading next.
Okay.
As you can readily see, there's not, while they use a uniform Excel spreadsheet for the submission of their various budgets, details vary from sport to sport, as opposed to the music boosters had considerably more detail. So we could go back to them and say, hey, for instance, middle school wrestling. Apparently, the only fundraising they have listed is parent donations. Nothing more. Maybe that's it. But there's not a breakdown where they might have 3 or 4 categories under description, not a breakdown of what they intend exactly to do in some cases, or what the breakdown is in the dollar. So we could do a couple of things. We could establish a uniform submittal form and ask them to use that and specify the details that we want.
I think that would be my personal preference, is for the business office to
Be happy to do that.
put something together. I think in concert with discussions with the various boosters, if they have some input on,
We could
make sure
prepare something
it's,
and then submit it for their input and come between now and a year from now.
yeah, and we can always go back. This is a brand new policy. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect, so we can always go back and revise it to include that form or any other detail. I guess my first question was, this list of all the groups, is this a sum total of all the, how do we know this is a sum total of all not just sports, I mean for the clubs or
Every SRCO.
anything, how would we know?
I would want to, this is primarily high school, but I would want to work through Rob, get back to the building principals and make sure that everyone that's a legitimate organization potentially could be functioning in a fundraising capacity has submitted there. This is what I received as of August.
No, I think this is a good start. This is a good start, because for informational reasons, I just want everybody to know that the purpose of us doing this is to expose what the fundraising's for, and in some cases, where you have teams fundraising for apparel, well, say that apparel is uniforms. Well, like the email that we just received this week, where the middle school track kids are uniforms. In some cases, they're taking them off and sharing them because they don't have enough. That's something that the district really should be, if we're going to continue to fund that sport or activity, that it's in my opinion, the district should be supplying that. And we want to uncover what all this is to make sure that the baseball team isn't fundraising for baseballs, if that's the direction we're going to go.
That was the reason I attached what they submitted to my summary, because you can readily move down through any of these columns where it speaks to uniforms, annual replacement uniforms, and team apparel, and then flip to there's an amount there, flip to their individual sheet and get the detail that they submitted for what they intend to use those dollars for. The same way under equipment, because you will find baseball, footballs, basketballs in those categories.
Okay. I guess the next, we would need, per our policy, we have to approve these booster units to be, a part of the district. So I guess at some point we'll discuss with the board president and the secretary as far as getting a motion on the agenda to approve those that have submitted the information to the business office satisfaction. And then if there's any other ones that come out, we'll flush those out. But at this point, these groups, as long as the insurance of all that has met your criteria and they're okay, we would move those. So we would approve them as a booster organization.
Which brings us to the point of, I know you enjoy working on this policy, and you mentioned at the last meeting, under paragraph 4, where it speaks to the submittal needs to be made by August 31st, but the board needs to approve that annually in August.
Mm-hmm.
So we suggested perhaps changing the policy for the submittal to be by July 31st in paragraph 4, and then the approval in August. Or September as far as the approval, because even if they were to, the business year, fiscal year for the district is June 30th, so if you gave them a month to get it to us by July 31st, and there's no meetings in July, so we're not going getting everything summarized and getting it on the cow by August isn't insurmountable,
Mm-hmm.
but September might be a more reasonable approval at the start of the school.
If I could, may I read the part that Mr. Small's referring to? Would do a list of current officers, including contact information and a current statement of bylaws, objectives of the group, and a copy of the approved budgets, of which we have. These documents must be submitted to the business office by, he's suggesting, July 31st every school year. The list of the officers must be submitted annually, objectives and bylaws, so the changes must be, but that's the gist of it. We need to get those things from them to approve them.
Yeah, I would wait to change the policy after the business office comes up with a form that they would like to use, and as we get through this, we'll reach out to these groups, see what worked and maybe what didn't work. If we have to make some alterations, that would probably, then we could do everything at the same time and do it once.
Yeah, let's just keep that in mind.
But I think it was a good start. We got basically the information that we were looking for. We received, maybe not the detail, but it's a good start.
So I'll get the form developed. I'll work with Mr. Hurley and the principals to capture all of the organizations that seem to be viable players in most.
Okay.
All right.
I just want to point out too that the policy does say the purchase of equipment and apparel in excess of $1,000 must include in advance notification to the superintendent or designate.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of areas.
Apparel purchases on here.
Yeah, both in equipment and apparel that are connected.
And this is, I would imagine, going on every year over how many
Yep.
years, but at least now we're aware
These are
of
the
it.
things we need to look at and address, yeah. So the point is, I think the notification is so there's a chance for them to get us to help them pay.
Well, and it's just not that. It's also the Title IX implication. We want to make sure that we're monitoring the contributions, so we don't see a large influx of money for a male sport versus a female sport. I mean, it's okay if I understand it. The female sport can be, infinitely higher as far as support. It just can't be the reverse, which is fine. And we just want to make sure we're always clean and we're not in violation of Title
Just
IX.
specifically referencing an equipment or apparel purchase. So I think, as I said, I think it has to do with maybe the school needing to chip in more on those, which is why they're requesting advance notice of that.
Then that's part of
Just something I need to be aware of.
right. That wasn't specifically part when we did this policy. That wasn't what we were specifically looking at. But it's just like an onion. As you start peeling away the layers, you start getting into more things, and that was one of the things that came out of it, that,
Right.
you know, what these organizations were actually fundraising for, and really should those things or some things be, you know, the responsibility of the district. Mrs. Laurel Reno, do you have a question or comment?
Mr. Schwal eventually got to it, but with all the individuals, there is a description that tells you if it's extended a team apparel. Like for wrestling, it's warm-ups. It tells you what it is, and if it's an extended team apparel, it's personalized, it's that student's. If it's a uniform, it stays with the district. That makes a little bit more clarification. But under each one of these individual ones, it gives you a little bit better idea of what each expense is. So now my question is, if the board has to be notified for purchases of apparel and equipment over $1,000, does the submission of this budget qualify as notification? If they have on here that they're going to purchase uniforms this year and it's budgeted to be $4,000, have we notified you that you're purchasing it?
That is the purpose.
Okay.
That's what I'm wondering.
There's not another notification that needs to be made?
Only if you exceed what you reported.
Okay. And we did go with this, every budget with Mr. Shannon before they were turned in, so he would be aware of what's out there and what's...
Did you find it difficult? Was there any? Do you have any suggestions on it, or, I mean, if we asked,
Well, we
you
didn't
know, a
have
little bit
the
more
form.
clarification? This is the first year.
We had to create the form and then trying to look at 23 different sports and figure out what's a common word that's general enough that we can put something that might be one sport specific, but we didn't want to have 27 line items.
Well, I mean, that was a good example that you, personal versus something, a personal attire versus
Right.
something that would be
And like-
kept with the district.
And to give you an annual replacement, baseball, softball, they need belts and socks every year. Those don't last from year to year, that kind of stuff. Or you might have to buy 3 pairs of pants because they got ripped during the last season. That's what that kind of stuff is.
Okay, thank you. Any other board comment or
Thank
public
you.
comment? Okay. Okay, I think we're gonna skip over the new policies that we received, because I would like to get into the in-process policies. And the first one, the school volunteers. Did everyone have an opportunity to read the language? And I'll be upfront with, I pulled this language that's italicized out of about three school districts' policies relating to school visitors.
Yeah, I don't think I have it in this big file here. Student fundraising, maybe it's down here.
Well, what the language is we kind of got hung up on in the committee of the whole as a community participant, and what that would be, and try to have a clear distinction between what a community participant is and a volunteer. And plus, with keeping in mind that we don't want to have someone with a questionable background or a blemish on their background having a one-on-one opportunity with a child. I think this language may address that, and I wanted to go over it with you and see if we can first, discuss this language and come up with a recommendation. So, a community participant is an individual whose actions do not rise to the level of a volunteer. Their activity is restricted to a classroom and do not have the opportunity to be unsupervised with a student. A typical example, without limiting the category of individuals who may be considered a community participant, a community participant may be an individual who is a career day or other similar speaker or participant visiting to share information with students under continuous supervision of a school employee. I mean, it locks it down. We don't want these people to be on the buses. We don't want to have them, in my opinion, I don't want to have them chaperoning outside the district. I want, if they're going to be here, have them in a classroom, or if they're in the auditorium, or maybe the library if it's a reading exercise. So that was kind of a hodgepodge of different other school district policies that dealt with this. Because we have a visitor policy, but that visitor policy is really for the people coming into the building to drop something off, or it's really not related to somebody who's coming in to interact with our students.
What you just described, like, I've gone to my granddaughter's classroom a couple of times to read stories to them or whatever, and walk into the office, sign in, be escorted to the classroom, and be with the teacher the entire time. I mean, that's what you just described.
I think the language is better than what we had before. It was a little.
Perfect. What do you think, Mr. Burns?
The only thing that just bringing to your attention, for example, a volunteer at a snack bar at the football game, then under this policy would be considered a district volunteer, would have to get clearances. This is just restricting them to people who are in a classroom with the teacher. That's
Right,
all.
right, because
It would work.
just say if you're at the snack bar, you're not interacting with students. You're in the public. If you're pushing like
Yeah.
music equipment onto the field, it's not. You're not. There's no one-on-one opportunity with a student, or if you're
I have seen them alone in a snack bar with students, though. Isn't that what you're saying? That they
Well,
have
I
a
said
higher level
the way I
student?
would read this, because it says restricted to a classroom, then someone who's doing a snack bar would be a district
Volunteer, so they have higher.
They would have a higher level of clearances.
Clearances.
Yeah, the way this policy reads right now, if we did it this way.
So you're saying we
Which
should
I'm
probably
thinking-
strike out their activity is restricted to a classroom?
Well, it
order
would
to
depend
protect-
upon whether we want to restrict them
Yeah.
from the snack bar people. I mean,
Right.
like you said,
I
they
have seen them, alone with kids in the snack bar from time to time. They're stocking or something, and it did raise a flag for me.
I never knew
Laurel,
students were in the
Laurel,
snack bar.
I will say, if we have to get clearances for every volunteer that's going to work at the football snack bars, we can just shut the snack bars down. Because
Well,
that's
so-
gotta be 150 people that would have to get clearances in order to come in and work during a home football game.
I think the solution there is to just say students are not allowed in the snack bar.
They're not.
Oh, then there we go. There shouldn't be
The
students
only
in
time
there.
students have been in the snack bar is when my daughter has come to help me load sodas into the cooler to get prepared.
Someone saw that and was good.
But students are not allowed. Now, I can't tell you, like, if lacrosse is running a snack bar on a Saturday afternoon for one of their games, I'm not there, because that's a team, and those are team parents that are running that snack bar. Their child is out on the field.
I don't know, was it when we had that, what's that, a thon at night when they close up?
Well, that's Relay for Life, so
Relay
that's a
for Life.
whole different thing. That's not a school, that's not
I'm trying
us.
to think, I can't quite recall when I saw that activity. Would they have been, is it possible during the?
Oh, it's, I guess it's possible.
I just want the board to be
Anything's possible.
apprised of the scope of the.
I mean, anything's possible, because you have adults and kids spending the night out there on the stadium ground. But I do know that during football games, it's adults only in there.
This policy really wasn't intended to, handle the football game, something, a public event like that.
Yeah.
Because the kids and parents of all types are interacting in the stands and, in the walkways and everything else. So they're under supervision all the time.
You'd almost have to say anybody who's coming to the Winter Chorus concert will have to get their clearance in order to come sit in the auditorium. It's that kind of interaction. Yeah, I mean, because you got students and adults in the same enclosed building.
No, a snack bar alone in a corner with a kid in a snack bar is a different
I think that,
phenomenon.
yeah, I think that would just be something that it would be communicated
No
to the
kids ever allowed
to the
in,
JOC, the
yeah.
JOC that, hey, you're overseeing the snack bar, either one, whether it be the Fry Shack or the large
I think a
snack
sign
shack.
should be posted on the snack
No
bar that says
children.
no admittance under 18 or
Yeah.
something like
Oh, and it's
that.
absolutely because of insurance purposes.
Yeah.
You were not allowed in the fry shack because of the equipment that's in there.
And we just need to be more vigilant about that.
We're working Mickey D's, right? We're 16 yet.
Yeah.
The good thing about this is if I bring a speaker in a classroom, which we like to do, is we don't have to jump through 5 hoops to get someone. We get a college professor. He's not going to come in if we say I got to get 3 different clearances to do that. And they're under supervision,
Right.
so there's.
It's the concept. We just didn't want the opportunity
Yeah.
that somebody, for whatever reason, would be one-on-one with a child.
Yep.
Well,
without
and the same person can still come back. We talked about last time, how many times you're limited to. If the person keeps coming in as a community participant, then that's fine, because they're
Right.
constantly supervised.
Right.
It's not like after 4 times in the building, we have to worry about it.
Yeah,
This makes
I think
total
this
sense
is,
to
I
me.
think this was a little bit better than what PSBA gave us. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit, grammatically, as Mr.
So we have to
pointed out.
add, if we're going to allow them, it shouldn't just be restricted to the classroom then, to go back to Mrs. Reno's point, right? To specify that they are community.
Well, this doesn't
It
have
apply
anything to do with
sports at all.
this
It
doesn't have
apply to
anything to do.
volunteers at the shack.
What's that?
It doesn't apply to volunteers at the
Volunteer-
snack
yeah.
shack at all.
The snack shack is not, the football games and that type of thing is not part of this policy. It's just when we're in a school environment, how they're handled.
I think it's agreed.
Because I think the,
Well, it does
to
specify-
Mrs. Laurel, to Mrs.
Coaching.
Laura Reno's point, it's hard to find, volunteers to, stand there
Oh,
and
I
sell,
know. I'm just
sell.
saying we
stuff
should
at the snack
address it in the policy though, because we do, it isn't just in school time. It does say all coaching volunteers must have their clearances. It does talk about coaching in the policy also. So to say that it doesn't cover fundraising that's done
Well,
on school grounds.
remember, this is just the community participant part of this policy. The school volunteer, the district volunteer is a totally different level of background check that they
I know,
have
but I
to
think
do.
what Mrs. Reno is saying is what is somebody who works the snack shack considered then? Where do they fall under the policy?
An event volunteer?
Event volunteer? Maybe we need a special permit. They're not district volunteers or community participants. We can't just not address the category. They're a school volunteer.
Anybody have any examples or suggestions on?
Well, I think we really do need to clarify, first off, what is the scope of this policy? Is it only regulating volunteers within the confines of the school day, or is it for the entire district all the time?
Well, see, when you have the school volunteers, it talks about chaperones and,
Yeah.
when they travel, so it's already
all the time.
in here.
So that's what, I don't know, I kind of understand where Mrs. Bites is going with the community participant then, because we are talking about, like a community.
I think it's.
Well,
just
a community participant doesn't really involve the snack shack at all, because you're not with a teacher. Well, I don't know.
You're also not with a student.
Yeah, you're not with the student either. It's more of an adults volunteering with adults for the
Why don't
benefit
we
of the
do a little more
entire
research
district.
on it? We'll pass it like it is and then just come back.
Well, I'd rather not pass it as it is and have to come
Yeah.
right back and
Okay.
revisit it. So, since we're in this work session, if we could come up with some language or some suggestions.
Here, just breaking down, looking at the front end of this definition or this new language, community participant, an individual whose actions do not rise to the level of a volunteer. And they do not have the opportunity to be unsupervised with a student. That would describe the snack bar participant.
If you struck out restricted to a classroom.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just
That
talked
would-
about restricted
Their
to
activity
the
is
classroom,
restricted to
which is
the
what Mrs.
classroom,
Reno
yeah.
suggested, I think.
Yeah, so if we say an individual whose actions do not rise to the level of a volunteer and who do not have the opportunity to be
To be alone,
unsupervised
yeah.
with a student, that would
Yeah,
cover
because we
everybody.
can't just restrict them to the classroom anyway. If they go to a study hall to give a presentation and they're supervised the whole time, they're still just a community participant.
I agree
All right.
with that. Let's
Is
strike
that
that.
good?
Strike that verbiage.
So we're going to strike it, their activity does not have, their activity, yeah. So is restricted to the classroom. An individual whose actions do not rise to the level of a volunteer, their activity. All right, does not have to,
Skip their activity.
They still have to be approved by the building administrator.
yep. So we're striking is restricted to the classroom and, so their activity, it should be does not.
Yeah. Or their activities do not. One of them has to be plural.
Do not know, so they don't have to.
Activities do not have.
I'd say activities do not sounds
Do not
better.
have an
Sure.
opportunity.
Activities.
All right, just strike.
Carol, I think you're the English teacher. Does it sound activities do not or activity does not? I think activities do not sounds better.
Yep.
That works.
An individual whose actions do not rise to the level of a volunteer and whose actions, goes back to the now, do not have, whose actions do not have the opportunity to be supervised with this unsupervised, and whose actions do not, yeah, it would refer to whose actions, right? So it's again, it's do not. Whose actions do not, whose actions doesn't. I think it's different. But you can have, what is English teachers are doing. I think we got it though, right?
We're good.
All on
This is
board
good.
here?
I can work with this.
This is
Yeah.
4-0, because I'm okay with it. We strike that part.
Okay. All right. Now we can't approve it yet because there's still another component to this discussion, and that is if you look back. Let me get to the page. Yes. On page 3, section 4, subparagraph 2. Where we talk about if pre-approved by the building administrator as a volunteer, and if the volunteer requests, the district shall reimburse the cost of obtaining volunteer clearances for the district volunteers up to a maximum of, or we can strike that and it'd be nothing. Because right now, if you're a resident of Pennsylvania for 10 years, if you've been a resident for 10 years in Pennsylvania, you can get free of charge your PA criminal history, free of charge PA child abuse, and it costs you nothing. So there's no reimbursement. If you would have someone who lived in Pennsylvania less than 10 years, then they have to go for the federal fingerprint. And I forget what that amount was. I think I heard like $35.
Yeah, it's about 31. Yeah.
If we took that section out completely, couldn't we just handle it with our procedures year to year? Does it even belong in the policy?
You're going to wind up addressing it one way or the other.
But we would have
So-
the flexibility to address it year to year as the.
I don't know if you want to set
superintendent
different standards, like one year we're going to reimburse, one year we won't, the next year we might. I think it should be set in stone.
Okay.
The danger of this is, how do you budget for, first, we haven't budgeted for this, and so, and how do you know how many people it's going to be?
And right now it'd be zero because
Yeah.
for most people, I would think the majority, there is no cost to them.
Well, they do have to be
95% of people,
Right.
98% of people.
They
And
have
if
to
you're
be
if you're a
pre-approved.
coach, then you have to go for the fingerprinting,
Yes,
and that's not reimbursable.
They do have to be pre-approved. So if we do see it's getting a little bit unwieldy in terms of how many are coming forward, then I guess the building administrator would be able to recognize that,
Yeah.
and we'd have heads up, or have a heads
Even
up.
if this was full price for both, we're talking about $20.
Yeah.
Unless they had to go for the full
Yeah.
fingerprint thing. So I'd rather myself, if I'm going to volunteer, this is me speaking. If I'm going to volunteer, I'm not going to submit for, even if it was $20, I'm not going to submit for reimbursement. Because even when it was amount that you had to pay for, I personally did not submit for reimbursement because I wanted to volunteer. What do you guys think about that? I mean, that's just my opinion. Everyone's going to have their own.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many people will end up going through all the necessary paperwork of getting the $20 reimbursement. I know when I put in mine, I didn't ask for the reimbursement. I don't think so, at least. I'm fine putting $20 on the line as the.
That's fine. In my notes, I do
maximum.
have it 25, when we had the special on 25.
Yeah, we had thrown around some numbers.
Let's go around that
Okay.
25.
And then it helps the families who need it. Some of them do need $20 is all they're living on in a week. I know families like that. They only have $20 to make it to the end of the week. So that person might want to go through the trouble of
All right, so
filing for the reimbursement.
we need to coalesce around a
20 or
20.
25, okay.
20, 25. I'm okay with that.
220,
50.
221, whatever it takes, right?
Yeah.
Can't
20.
imagine it. You got 100, what's that?
Well, I mean, they're only going to get
$2,000.
reimbursed for what they spend. Like they do, we're not just going to give them a check for $25. I'm fine saying 25 as long as they show proof that that's what
Yeah.
they need. Yeah.
Well, the fingerprints are 30, did I hear?
Yeah, you're in the 30s on your fingerprints.
So we're just helping them anyway.
And that would be,
The volunteer has to.
I would think that would be a smaller percentage of the
Yeah,
people because
exactly.
they have to be
Worst case.
less than 10 years in Pennsylvania. And if they request,
Right.
so what's the number?
25.
I vote 20.
You 20? I say
I'll
20.
second 20.
You say 20? All right, 20.
All right, I'm on the motion's approved, there's 3-1. I'm voting against it, but that's okay. 3-1, we'll move it forward as $20.
Before we move from this policy, I have a quick question for Rob, Mr. Hurley. Having a mother as a teacher, I know at Pottstown they're requiring their teachers, there's a new security protocol out there for teachers and staff as well. How are we responding in Daniel Boone with fingerprinting requirements and all that
Oh,
stuff?
they all have, we're all over it. They all have to have that done, so.
And it was just on them to make it happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
They have to turn it into us, and then we can look up the originals.
And we're good on that?
Yeah, we're absolutely all over that.
I had a little trouble.
It's actually
doing
very
that.
time consuming for our secretaries. Lisa spends a lot of time on that, just trying to track that stuff down and make sure we're all up to
Could
date.
you repeat that discussion? I didn't hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at your
That's okay.
information. Yeah, we're all over that in
What
terms
was your
of,
question?
yeah, in terms of the professional staff have to have all their
Oh,
pictures,
okay.
the fingerprints, the job pieces, the passport, so, yeah.
It's for public concern.
Lisa spends a lot of her time with that particular piece. And there's another piece of that law too, just whenever one of our former employees for the last however many years applies somewhere else, we're signing off on forms saying they didn't get pushed out because of something that was interrupted or something like that. So, yeah, it's that.
So it's routine that you clear teachers anyway, it's just a new
It's a new piece of this,
criteria.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rob, you feel that, with this language, it'll work for the building administrators?
I'm very comfortable
Because we don't
with
want
it.
to, right, we really don't want to
And I actually
dissuade
think that's a
people.
lot better and there's a lot more clarity than it was before, so I think that'll be helpful to us.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we are going to move policy 914 then for first read.
And doesn't it replace more than 915? Doesn't it replace like 912 and 915? Because I remember when Mrs. Torsia submitted this, it was supposed to be a compilation of a whole bunch of...
There was a very large
Mindful.
document. I mean, it was like 15 pages that this document originally was.
Right.
And it really, the context of what she said was parts of that volunteer policy were already covered in other policies. And she started citing off
Right.
the other
That's
policies.
what I'm saying, we just want to make sure all those other policies get pulled off, that this was originally intended to.
What this did is not duplicate those other policies. Those other policies will stay. It's just that they repeated just say 912. I'm just going to pick a number. That 912, some of the language in 912 was in the volunteer policy. This policy, well, 912 is a policy unto itself. 914 is a policy unto itself. We just took out the cross sectional
I actually
language.
thought it was the other way, that there were contradictions, that one policy was saying one thing.
Well, like that-
Mr. Hurley, if you could just check on it.
I'll
before
review
we-
it to make sure. Yep.
Okay.
All right, good discussion, great. All right, so we are moving like I said, 914. And the next item of business is the policy regarding teleconferencing. As everyone recall, last month at the Committee of the Whole, it was tasked the Policy Committee to redefine what a voting meeting would be. One possibility is the voting meeting is once a month, because that's truly what our voting meeting is. That's what we advertise as a voting meeting. I think Mr. Kurtz has some feelings on it too, and I'll let him speak to that. We do vote occasionally at Committee of the Whole. Are those defined as voting meetings as well? So it's either going to be revising it to include 22 possible meetings or 11 possible meetings. So we'll open it up for discussion.
I guess I'll start just by saying I think we need clarification, as I think the definition of a legal voting meeting may already be defined for us in Robert's rules and in the state code. I spoke to a friend who's a parliamentarian, and he explained that you should never be voting at committee of the whole meetings, because even under our policy and Robert's rules, it says that official action cannot take place at a committee meeting. And committee of the whole is a committee meeting, so when we vote at committee of the whole, we're not voting in proper form. The way that it should be done is that we gavel out the committee of the whole, and if we have to vote on something urgently, we can have a special voting meeting, which is not a regularly scheduled voting meeting, it's a specially scheduled voting meeting. So I think that would clarify what the meeting is. I guess we could change the policy to reflect if we wanted to.
But even in a special voting meeting would not be inclusive as a voting meeting for the purposes
Correct.
of this policy.
Yeah.
Just to take that a step farther, and I don't have the reference in front of me, but I believe when you gavel out the committee of the whole to the special voting meeting, it is for a specific topic.
Yes.
Not for just a broad, general.
And that has to be
laundry list of
advertised.
things.
That has to be advertised what the topic is, much like our executive session.
And then it's limited to that topic
Yes.
that's advertised.
So I think this is an area where the whole board needs to clean up how we do our voting versus committee of the whole policies before we can really even address the specific policy. Because I remember back when I joined the board, we did do it in the proper way, so to speak, of we didn't vote during committee of the whole. We gavelled it out and we had a special voting meeting. But eventually a lot of us just came to the conclusion, well, why are we doing this? It's a waste of time. We're all here, we're sitting around the table, but we never really considered the implications
This is
of
why,
Robert's
yeah.
rules and
Yeah.
state law. So I think it would be helpful to get some insight from Brian Suvers, just what differentiates committee of the whole versus voting in Robert's rules. And one of the issues that I also learned, speaking to my friend who's a parliamentarian, solicitors are not trained in Robert's rules. They often just kind of learn it on their own. And for a lot of government bodies, they'll approve a parliamentarian for the purpose of clarifying Robert's rules. Not speaking for Brian, of course, he may have taken a course on Robert's rules, but from what I understand, that's not part of the basic training for becoming a lawyer.
Well, another thing is it's actually a conflict because board policy says we abide by Robert's rules.
Yes. I don't have the specific citation in Robert's rules, but my understanding is, from everything I learned in PSB and all that, you have to be acting as the full board in a board meeting, not in a committee meeting.
Well, let me ask this question. For example, on the committee of the whole meeting tonight, we're going to vote on personnel.
And it shouldn't be done.
Well,
that way.
we're not going to vote on personnel tonight.
Yeah, we actually are.
Oh, you-
And
According to Act 93.
there's quite a few motions on here, and only because what we've been doing is considering every meeting a voting meeting. And Scott explained it shouldn't be. But we haven't determined that. That's why this agenda looks like it does.
So I think before making any changes at this point, we should get some clarification on that, on the specific legalities.
Okay.
I mean, that would be my
What else?
preference.
I noticed in policy 006, the mother policy of the one we're talking about, there's discussion of the COT, of the committee of the whole as a discussion meeting. Like there is intention of those being two separate meetings, and that the voting meeting is clearly intended to be what we call the second meeting. But I agree with Connor. I think more to the point is that we're not following our policy procedurally. Like when the call comes in, we're supposed to do audio checks, and we're supposed to make sure that person can hear, that the public can hear, and then we have to hear the reason why the person is calling in. And we have, as a board, we have to sort of permit the call, that it is, I forget what the word is, extraneous circumstances. And I think we have agreed that one of our DB's finest, getting a college education on DC was certainly one of those circumstances. But for the public record, we should be following the policy and documenting it, therefore, that the call, that it was a conference call. And a conference call counts as being in attendance, assuming the call is accepted, that it's permitted publicly, then it's an attendance, it's attended.
And if I recall in the meeting minutes, when Mr. Kurtz participates via phone, I think it says in parentheses via phone or
I think
And
it
so-
something like that.
We should see if it's even a problem yet before we change the
on the
policy.
agenda.
Let's start making note of that.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have the action items here. I can reach out to Mr. Subers and see if he can define for us in a legal way for the Robert, just
Yeah.
to verify what the committee of the whole actually, the purpose is, and, procedurally how that should be handled. If it's not intended to be a voting meeting, then it shouldn't be counted as a voting meeting. If we have a special voting meeting that could be advertised, and then, well, obviously it has to be, but will that count as per this policy?
Yeah, so I guess that's a good route to follow first. It needs to begin with a conversation with Brian. And that'll be beneficial, not just in terms of this policy, but the entire board
Making us
operation.
a better board.
Okay.
Well, if I may, I did some reading of our policy after the last discussion, or the discussion at the last meeting. And if you read that, it says in a calendar year. So,
Yeah.
if you're going by 22 meetings a year, until somebody is not here in person for 12 of them, there's still the possibility they would make 22 in a calendar year. If you're going by 11, until somebody is not here for 6, there's still a possibility they'd make the number.
Yeah, I'm not even sure there's any violation
And
of
then,
this traffic.
the only thing it really implies, doesn't say, it implies, is that you could only call in that many times.
Mhm.
So if you did miss this 51%, you just couldn't call in again. That's the only
You either
problem.
miss the meeting or you
That's
show up.
really
No,
the
yeah,
only-
there's no removal or anything. It's
Yeah.
just whether you're permitted to call in that 6th time or
Yeah.
12th time, whatever we discern.
And really, if you're going to look at this policy, it should have been, the language should be in a school year, because that's really what our,
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe it's
But it
easier.
reads this calendar year.
because, when you have elections, your election is going to, well, it really wouldn't matter, because that's going to span over a calendar year and a school year.
Yeah, I'm
anyway,
not
so
sure
it
it
doesn't
matters. If a 4th person calls in, we do not permit it. We just don't permit it. That
Right, you have to
board
have
member is
a
absent,
super, you have to have a
actually.
super majority of
Right.
6.
There's no repercussions. He's just not allowed to do it. He's not permitted, and he's absent.
So the consensus is we're not going to change the policy, but we'll get some clarification from Mr. Sewers.
I would like to say that I do think a voting meeting, I do agree with Mr. Kurtz, a voting meeting is a voting meeting. There's 12 of them, 11 of them a year. I would like to propose that we try to hear the policy as it's written
Okay.
and monitor 6, that no one should have more than 6 teleconference meetings.
Now, Rich, as the board president, you want to,
The only thing I think before you vote, I think we ought to have the Robert's Rule references in front of us so we understand what we're voting on.
yeah.
Also that.
But I'm suggesting that our definitions are in our own policy.
Yeah, but
When you
our-
refer to the committee of the whole as a discussion meeting, it is inferred that the school board is the voting meeting. The second, the regularly scheduled, all that language that they refer to, the other meetings in our policy.
Yeah, well,
Are clear.
again, it's going to be your policy committee recommendation to the board, and our past president has always said every meeting is a voting meeting, so that's why I think having the references.
But I'm
It's
just trying,
also-
we try to build cohesion as a committee to make a recommendation to the
Okay.
It's
school board.
also
Well,
important to
I'll
note-
have Brian, when he responds, he usually get a response via email that I'll send out
And
there.
what exactly are we asking him? What Robert's rules
Yeah,
consists of voting?
when it comes to the committee, what we're talking in the context of this policy, okay, that we're talking about the committee of the whole, is that committee of the whole first, number one, defined as a voting, even though if we do vote sometimes or regularly at a committee of the whole meeting, is that really a scheduled voting meeting?
If you
you
read
know-
over the policy 006, the mother policy, you'll see that Never.
So,
There's
I mean,
never.
that's the first question, see how Robert's Rules of Order, defines that. And then everything else will kind of fall into place after that.
Yeah, I have two quick things. One on the conversation with Brian, the reference I'm talking about the parliamentarian friend I have. He also cast some questions as to can actions taken at a committee of the whole, if it's not officially and legally, are they legally binding? Essentially, if it's a discussion meeting, and Robert's Rule says that official action cannot happen by definition at a committee meeting, are actions taken at committee of the whole legally binding?
Well,
that's more of a philosophical question, I guess.
It's there's
Beyond
going to be
scope.
times where, that we had to give clear direction to the administrator on something, or,
Yeah.
we had to bring back a teacher, or there was some other thing where the administration needed an answer that day,
Yeah.
that night. So,
But then there's
I
the
mean,
emergency and special
supposed to
voting.
be a special
I'm just
session.
talking
What I'm
Sure,
trying to
no.
say is we could recess the committee of the whole meeting,
Right.
right.
go to the
That's-
special
That's,
board meeting, and then come
that
back
works.
in.
If I could just read the definition from section 13. The board shall hold, it's called the committee of the whole meeting. The board shall hold a public meeting of a committee of the whole to discuss ideas to be acted upon at a subsequent regular or special meeting of the board. Official action may be taken at the discussion meeting on matters that are of an emergency nature or where time or other constraints compel such a vote before the next regular voting meeting. So if you just read the language of the intent, it's very clear that they're referring to the committee of the whole as a discussion meeting. There's the rules for the discussion meeting. If it's urgent or time compels such a vote, public notice of such meeting shall be advertised. The committee of the whole meeting will normally be held one time each month, at least 2 weeks prior to the, here's the language again, regular voting meeting. I don't think there's any discussion. I mean,
No,
it's very clear.
I would have to agree with you.
One more thing, though, from my understanding, the policy does not prohibit, there's no limit, and from being in attendance when they discussed and crafted this policy, there is no limit on the ability of a board member to call into committee meetings, again, because those committees are supposed to be discussion meetings, and it's all about having different perspectives. And if committee of the whole is, as it truly is, a committee meeting, then the policy would not affect those number of meetings board members can call into, it's only the voting meetings.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's what the policy.
So we're back to the
Just
number
can't
of
miss.
11.
yeah. 11 for the meetings at the end of the month.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
We got a
Andrew.
member of the public.
Yes, sir, Mr. Basil.
I just wanted to point out, it was designed to impact whether or not somebody could vote at those meetings, not necessarily call in or participate or listen or those types of things, but whether or not you could actually cast a vote
Yeah.
remotely. So,
Right, we had that discussion, you may not have heard it, but, once you reach the threshold of you missed 6, you could still call in, and as a member of the committee, you just did not have the ability to cast a vote.
For the committees, though, I don't think,
Not me, for
for
me the
the,
whole.
for the board, yeah, the board meetings, yeah. Good.
So even if the voting meeting, if you miss 6 meetings,
Yeah.
you can call in, you can participate, but when it comes to a roll call vote,
Yeah.
or otherwise, you can't participate. Is that,
so the suggestion is, because we had it, we included both the committee of the whole and the voting meetings, because we were voting during the year in both meetings.
That's what we talked about.
And you never know
right?
when you're going to have a voting meeting. Like tonight, we could vote on something. And you don't know until Friday before, but you may already be scheduled for a flight out of town or whatever because of work or something else.
Right.
And then you're precluded from participating. So
That's the way it's crafted right now.
All right.
Any other public discussion? I don't know if he signed it. I direct the ex officio member to verify that. Okay, very good. Well, we actually got through the agenda minus some of these 000 policies that we're going to get to. Before we adjourn today, I start looking at your calendars. I'd like to see if we can, as much as I hate to ask of more of your time, is if we can possibly schedule another meeting this month, because these 000 policies have to be reviewed, and we're going to start moving those through the pipeline. So I'd like to see if we can come up with another meeting date.
I will likely need to call in, and any day in the evening works except Tuesdays and Thursdays for me.
I was going to say the 22nd, but that's a Tuesday. Do we have Wednesday the 23rd, next Wednesday?
I can do the 23rd.
Good.
You're okay with that, Ms. Spites?
Yeah.
Well, that was easy. All right, so 6 o'clock, we'll do 6 o'clock on the 23rd, and we'll start whatever we can't get through today. In the next 20 minutes, we'll pick up where we left off on those policies.
So it'll be for the express purpose of starting to review the PSB policy.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. Exactly. Okay, so now you could all have received a packet of policies from PSB. Yeah, it's a big packet. These are all our policies, all our local board policies. It is a little difficult to see in here what the actual policy looks like. But where you see, we'll start with the manual policy 000 local board procedures. Everything where you see bold is language that was added or changed by PSB. And if you see our first one, it's almost entirely changed by PSB. So my question, and I know we had touched on this before, is if we do a cursory review of these policies, how in depth we want to go through and read each one. I think we should just to go through it to make sure that we don't have any questions. I had scanned through a few of these. A lot of it is just rewording something that was already in our existing policy. I would have preferred having the original policy with strike-through, strike-through language, so you could see what was actually changed. But this is what we received from PSBA nonetheless.
Should we at least get them side by side?
Well, that was going to be my question. As we get a method of reviewing these, what would be the easiest way? I think we could certainly do that. Go through the language, of how the policy started out versus what it came back as. Because, like I said, I would have rather have seen the document come through with striked out language.
Yeah.
And
Maybe we should do it as a homework assignment. We do the bulk of the work and sit and look at them side by side
I'd rather.
at home, and then we come and bring them and discuss it. Which means we get out of school early today. Just a thought.
Mr. Speed,
Yeah, I got to see it side by side.
I think that
but what would it be
We'll do it right
if we could
now.
assign you that homework task, or
Or you
what's
ask
a
me.
home
Oh, did you do your homework?
your home
Yeah.
reinforcement
Because I
of
can sit there, I can read them too. I can read them out loud and do as it is, and your policy and everything.
I don't think it's worthwhile doing it now. I think we should just do it.
I think that it could be helpful if board members or committee members would look at the proposed PSB policy and then identify and compare it if they'd like to the current policy, and then make notes. I want to talk about
That's
this.
what I'm thinking.
Right.
I want to talk
Well,
about this.
this is what the purposes of the discussion. So as we start getting into these,
Yep.
Mr. Hurley, when is the next 100 series? Did they give us any kind of?
Yeah, they give us that time.
Okay.
I also think we should be inviting the public or board members to come, announce what sections we'll be reviewing, what range, so that they can participate in the discussion during the extra meetings. Hey, anybody know?
Well, what we
covering?
could do is Mrs. Kiki could scan these pages, the printout of the current policy, and they could compare that on their own to what's on the website, which is the current policy? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't mean to start circulating these unapproved ones. I just meant to invite them to come to the discussion and listen to us discuss the policies as they were and as they're being proposed so that they can add in, make sure, oh no, the wording for that was because it was
Okay.
supposed to do this. You're wiping out wording that we wanted in because of this exception.
Well, we'll inform the rest of the board members of the policy meeting on next week. And,
Ask them if there's
and
any
if there's something, we're going to go through
stay engaged in the process, and physically come to the meetings if you have insight on any of them in the particular range that we'll be working on.
Just for your reference, PSB did provide some color as to what they did in this handout that's in the packet here. Yeah, it talks about deletion
Deletions and
notes.
notes.
Yeah.
It does, it says deleted a large portion.
Kind of vague.
Not really sure. If something was in there because of a specific event that occurred in this district, and we just took it out.
Well,
Then-
you also there's a lot of legacy things that are in there too that maybe don't apply
I
anymore,
agree. I agree. Yeah.
or the
I hope
official
Just like that.
official language, legalese, or you're saying the same thing, only different.
Yep.
I do
But-
want to have some discussion, and I'm sure we will at the next meeting, but on the board governance standards, code of conduct, because I know that was discussed back when I chaired this committee when it was first created, probably, I guess, 4 years ago. And some of the things in there, I don't know if you guys had the opportunity to evaluate it yet. I don't know if they belong in policy, quite frankly.
That's the first.
Like, it almost seems like just PSBA's, I don't know, mission statement almost kind of in our policy, and I think it could lead to some issues in the future. Just, I don't have any specific examples at the moment. I looked at it, it's just some of the items. Here, adopting and acting in accordance with the PSBA Code of Conduct for members of Pennsylvania school boards. Like, there are things in here that PSBA, they provide a service to us. I don't think they should be referenced explicitly in policy. And if we say that, they can amend their code of conduct at any time, and then we're beholden to it according to our policy. Like, there are things like that everywhere in
Our
here.
policy only goes up to 009 right now.
Yeah. We talked about adding this.
And
that's,
we did.
yeah, we talked back when it was the old board, and we decided we didn't want it because
You're
of
saying
these
you
issues.
shouldn't be referencing.
Even here, strategic plan, like there's a whole section of the strategic plan, and we don't do the strategic plan anymore as we used to. So I don't know. I don't support it personally.
Well, the PS naming themselves in the policy.
Well, there's that, but even individual, like there are so many items in here. Like there's one, like a lot of philosophical stuff. Let me find the one example.
It does probably put us in uniformity with the majority of the school districts in Pennsylvania, though, when you think about it.
Well,
So here
that's why
that
we.
has the code of conduct.
This is why we hired them. You're going to get everything that they have to offer.
Yeah.
So they're
That's
putting all the
awesome.
references in here. So
I got something
and
with
we can do, as a board, we can decide to do anything we want.
I know, but I guess I'm speaking a little bit in defense of doing it that way, or adopting it. No, it's
Well,
just
why
something-
don't we?
I agree with
I think
you about it.
I think we had the right answer before. Let's get the policy as it exists now. We have the policy as it was rewritten. Compare them, and then make notes on our own time. Come back next week prepared, and we'll go through it and we'll see how many we can
Yeah.
get through.
But this is a new policy, there won't be any notes. There's none in our records yet. So just be prepared to discuss it.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else? Any community participation? No?
I didn't miss anything on fundraising, did I? No? Okay.
We had an accounting of the SRCOs and students.
You have it under the future policies.
We
I
made
think
no
that's-
decisions. We're
Well-
still gathering data and monitoring the way the fundraising policy is being implemented. So
Yeah,
we
what-
didn't tie, the booster policy. So we haven't made any changes to fundraising yet.
I I'm talking about 219 student fundraising.
Right.
We're just kind of holding those off
We're still holding off.
until we gather enough
Until we
information.
see what's happening with the fundraising, with the booster policy and the way the fundraising is being done through the boosters before we.
Because the general feeling is we would like to know what the booster and support organizations are asking our students to fundraise for. Because there's been some concerns raised already that there are items that the students are being asked to fundraise for that perhaps the district should be supplying. All right, so we're just trying to write. We sent out the questionnaire for all the boosters and support organizations had to fill it out, stating this is where our budget is, this is what our expenses are. We got a rundown. I can give you a copy if you like. What has been reported so far in the categories. I think there still needs to be some cleaning up of that document. Our business manager was here stating they're pulling all the information together. It might be a better way to identify and categorize what all those expenses and fundraising opportunities are. So we're just coming into the information right now. When we have a good idea of what's going on, then we're going to look at then we're going to bring these 219 policies forward and talk about them specifically. Right now we're not interfering in what's going on in any of the. We're not changing the rules on any of the organizations that
So
are fundraising.
219 as it stands is what's in effect right now for the district, right?
Right. We have not changed it.
Very good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Okay. Is there anything else?
Sure. I mean, I just read something here that I disagree with entirely. The role of a school board here, striving toward ideal conditions for effective school board service to our community in a spirit of teamwork and devotion to public education is the greatest instrument for preserving and perpetuating our representative democracy. But I think the military might be a little bit more important than serving on the school board in terms of preserving and perpetuating our democracy.
We're going to go right to state code for some of that language.
Well, this stuff is just like...
Well, I think he's saying it's a little bit.
That's good to give us the heads up on that.
Yeah,
fluff.
so if you could review
That's
it,
the fluff.
yeah,
I
just
wanna look at that.
given that history of what the committee looked at before.
We paid for the fluff.
Yes.
That's a good point.
But on that note, we can talk about that next meeting.
Oh, we do.
Okay. So we're all good. We'll everyone on their own will do their evaluations of the current policies
All the
and the
zeros,
revised
zeros.
policy. Come back next Wednesday and we'll take it up again.
Just the 00s, right?
Just the 00s.
Would it be beneficial if we take notes to send those notes out to the other committee members? I think that might be
As
helpful.
long as we're not, as long as
Debating.
we're debating or make discussions, if you're just saying, hey, I have this.
Word changes almost, just FYI to discuss at the meeting.
Yeah, that right now, we don't have a Word document available besides that we could work in with these, do we?
I think set up a Google Doc where people can share.
Because
Very helpful.
Sandy said, she had mentioned, well, I could give you the password so you can go in there directly. It's like, no, I don't want myself or anybody in there besides the people that can get blamed for screwing it up. So I think it would be better if they held the passwords and they do the actual changes. But if we could get a Word document of these, then we could make changes and that we could track changes and who made them. That would be a lot better.
Yeah, we could talk to Scott Matz about that. I know Google Doc Suite is fantastic for those.
Collaborate.
Because
Could you take
multiple people can, yeah, I'll take care of that.
Yeah, that way we
Multiple
could
people can
distribute the
edit it
same
once it's ready
document
to
and then we could
And it's
all
all in
make
different
changes.
colors, so you can keep track of who said what. You can even have it sent so that the public, if there's an issue of the public needing access to this, they can view it, but they can't edit it, but they can see our comments.
And this goes back to the other discussion we had about that document that flowed through the district for approvals for various events. And I said, where I work, we use Adobe 11. There's a great publisher feature to that. And you can, an email sent and all to the people that are invited to review it. And there is a hyperlink that when you select that, you are logging into the server. And then you could go ahead and make your changes. It's identified by yourself because you're logging in as you. And each person, as soon as you publish your comments, everyone else's view is updated with those comments. And it's actually a pretty valuable tool. And there's no charge for it. So it actually is a pretty powerful tool. All right, if there's no other business, we'll conclude the meeting at 7:16.